I kind of wanted to come on here a little bit today and talk about self-compassion, how important it is for us to realize when something's not working. That's part of self-compassion. If it's a job you're really stressed at, if it's a family member, money issues, anything in life that is hard and a burden on somebody, and everybody has these things, and trauma in the past, to just be aware in general that you're having a problem is the first step in trying to find a solution. If I didn't get Lyme disease and I kept on working as a physical therapist, I would have never changed. Pretty much I would have married the wrong person. I would have been in this life that I hated, and it took me getting so ill for my body to literally shut down, to be like, you are no longer doing this. I was so strict on my body, and I had almost zero self-compassion at the time. Zero. I had to flip that around, and instead of being productivity based, I had to learn how to apply self-care in order to live a healthier life. There were a lot of times that nobody understood me, and I was the only one keeping myself up off the ground. Didn't have a lot of support, and I feel lucky right now because I do have support in my life from others, but there was a time where I feel like I had very little support in my life. I felt so alone, and I was almost like my own best friend, and everybody else left me because I was so sick and I couldn't, maintain the friendships. I wasn't able to leave the house. Self-compassion was my best friend. Self-compassion, it's an interesting thing. Kristin Neff is actually a researcher that defined 3 components of self-compassion, and the 3 components are mindfulness, kindness, and sense of humanity. So starting out with mindfulness is kind of what I was talking about, is just becoming aware of the problem, realizing that there's a problem, saying like, this is a really hard time for me because of so-and-so. Because if you don't realize that something's hard, you're most likely just going to keep digging yourself into the ground and beating yourself up, having negative self-talk. So just the awareness, something is not right and something is not working, you need to just address that. Just take a moment out of the busy lifestyle and say, hey, this is like a really hard time I'm dealing with right now, and what can I do to make it easier for myself? So the first component is awareness, but the second component is kindness, and that's actually saying, hey, what do I need right now? Do I need to rest, to go lay in bed all day? Talk to a friend, talking to yourself kindly, because I think we don't realize how we talk to ourselves, right? Like a lot of times we're like, oh, I just failed this test, I'm a failure, or oh, I just didn't do well on this project at work, I feel like a failure, I feel like I failed people, or I was just mean to someone and said the wrong thing in a conversation, or anything like that. Anything that you have negative self-talk about, if you don't stop yourself with saying like, okay, I realized I did this, how can I do it better the next time, rather than sulking in misery about it and saying this is the worst experience. There's a difference between doing something better the next time and analyzing it, and then negative self-talk. The negative self-talk would be like, I'm a failure, I can't do this, like almost feeling pity for yourself. Catastrophizing would be another example of, this went wrong, now this and this other thing's gonna go wrong, and it's never gonna go right, and I'm never gonna get out of the situation that I'm in that I so desperately need to get out of. It's more of figuring out, how can I get out of the situation? What do I need right now? What needs have I not addressed? Like, do I need to connect to somebody? Do I need to rest? Do I need healthy nutrition right now? Do I need to go take a walk? Do I need to exercise? Or like almost being your own cheerleader in a way. Yeah, allowing it to be there and allowing yourself to have the compassion, sit there with it, and then figure out what you need to feel better. It's different for everyone. I feel like just putting a hand on your heart or something like that and meditating. Maybe you need quiet, maybe you need silence, maybe you need space. That's kind of the kindness aspect of it, just being gentle with yourself, not beating yourself up too much over things that might have gone wrong in the past or you think are going to go wrong in the future. And then the last component of self-compassion is humanity. It is realizing that everybody suffers at some point in time, and we're all in this together. Nobody is alone in this world when it comes to suffering and dealing with hard things. Everybody has their struggles, and they might not be the same struggles, but they still are struggles. And everybody's had trauma in their past. Everybody's had difficult situations that they've had to deal with. So sometimes when you're in a difficult situation, knowing that you aren't alone is the most important thing that can come from it, because that actually builds connection. You know, if you ignore the situation, if you talk down to yourself and you don't realize that it's there, you think that nothing's wrong when it really is, that doesn't breed grounds for connecting with other people that are dealing with the same problem. So I feel like it's really important to, you know, to have all three components of being aware that there's a problem, you know, being aware that you feel like crap, actually being kind to yourself about it and realizing it's not the easiest of times right now. This is a daily practice. It's not just for very traumatic things. This is for just everyday life. Like, things happen in everyday life that aren't so comfortable, you know, and I feel like things just keep popping up in life. The kindness aspect has to be there in order to, you know, learn and grow. It's human nature to suffer sometimes and struggle, and it's hard. Life is hard. Realizing that it's hard for everyone, I think, is an important thing to understand with all of this. But the parasympathetic mode can kick in with more compassion and surrounding you. When you think of self-compassion, you almost think of like curling up in a blanket and laying there and giving yourself like hot chocolate, or just basically able to care for yourself in ways that you need to. That is going to breed more parasympathetic activity. So parasympathetic is going to relax you, help with digestion, help you think clearer, help you problem solve. Parasympathetic activity will help you look at life as a more open playing field and with an open mind, versus sympathetic activity, which would be talking down to yourself, always feeling like stuff is a threat, being in fear, thinking fear of the future, fear of failure. All that stuff is going to breed sympathetic activity, which is narrow focused, unable to problem solve, irrational behavior, not able to think clearly. Basically, yeah, it's the fight or flight, wanting to flee all the time, not wanting to address the problem, not thinking through the problem. Self-compassion does really breed calmness. Parasympathetic activity, which is going to relax the body and actually help you deal with the problem, versus the fight or flight that you can't really think clearly or concentrate, and you're always just wanting to run away from your problems. And the biggest example I can think of this is literally how I was living my life before. Stress, always working, never stopping, never analyzing what I was doing, just kind of like running from one thing to the other. The only coping mechanism I had in life was running. One day my body just stopped and I had to find new coping mechanisms, and that new coping mechanism was self-compassion. I no longer had running as an option. I no longer had my friends. I no longer had a good career, you know. Self-compassion was my only thing I could give myself to help myself through the time period. I feel like if I didn't become more self-compassionate, I wouldn't be here now, because there would be no way for me to deal with everything I dealt with. I'm going to link a couple articles about self-compassion. If you just search for Kristin Neff, I'm sure you can find some things. The other thing about self-compassion too is trying different treatment protocols for Lyme and chronic illness. Sometimes it doesn't work out the way it's expected. Sometimes it makes you worse. Sometimes it takes months to years to figure out if a treatment will work or not. So being compassionate with yourself when things aren't working helps you get through it and find something that does work. Because if you're not compassionate with yourself and you keep running yourself into the ground, thinking that a treatment should work and it's not, that won't help the situation, because then you might not look at other options of things to do. So self-compassion, I kind of just go with parasympathetic and keeping an open mind overall about problem solving. So yeah, I feel like it's really important to realize when you're in a hard place so you can actually do something about it, versus ignoring the situation and not maybe second guessing the choice that you first did. For instance, I was doing nutritional balancing, what comes to mind, and this was in January. I did nutritional balancing from January to April, and it was pretty hardcore balance. And I feel like nutritional balancing helped, but I also feel like my gut was getting a lot worse. I was getting more stressed at work. I felt all these things creep up, and to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I literally felt like death sometimes when I got back from work while I was still working. I'm not working currently. It was the roughest thing for me to have to come to the realization that maybe nutritional balancing isn't my answer. You know, I finally thought I found my answer with that. It was really rough for my gut to get worse, for my fatigue to kick back in. You know, I was trying to use collagen colloidal silver the most I could, but I could only do so much of it because it had side effects. It was a really rough time period, so I had to come to the realization that maybe this isn't working for me and be aware that I was actually getting worse and not better. And then I got into experimental mindset. I'm like, okay, let's try different things. Let's try, I never ever in a million years thought I would go back to using antibiotics. I just didn't. That was the last thing on my mind. Why would I want to do something that made me so sick in the first place? Antibiotics made me so sick in 2015. Like, why would I want to go back and do something that made me feel like hell, But something in me was like, I just need to try something. I need to try it. It's gotten to the point where it's bad enough that I need to try something that I haven't tried before. I feel like when I first started taking the Dapsone, I was in shock because it actually helped with my gut movement, and I literally didn't look like I was 7 months pregnant. As much as I'm for holistic healing and health, I feel like medicine does have its place, and I feel like I would not have found any kind of solution if I wasn't experimenting and trying with different things and having compassion, self-compassion for when things weren't working out, because, this treatment plan wouldn't have worked out, and I feel like I would have just had to try something else, and I still might in the future. It's a continual process. So anyways, I just wanted to do an update and talk to you about how self-compassion helped me, and I feel like it can apply to many people's situations in life, because I know a lot of people listening probably aren't dealing with chronic illness, but maybe some other hard time in their lives. I plan on doing more videos on behavior change and how to make behavior change sustainable and stuff like that. And more health, healing, wellness updates, all that jazz. So if you're interested, subscribe, and thank you so much for Thank you so much for watching, and if you've made it this far, wow, I love you. Okay, congratulations. I'll talk to you guys later.